The first thing Jackson Vale noticed when consciousness crept back wasn't the throbbing pain in his skull or the metallic taste of blood in his mouth, it was the gentle touch of something soft and warm against his forehead. His eyes fluttered open to find himself staring into the most captivating amber eyes he'd ever seen, set in a face covered with the finest silver blue fur. "Easy there, Star Sailor," a melodious voice purred above him. "You took quite a tumble." Jackson blinked hard, trying to clear the fog from his vision. The face hovering over him was undeniably alien, pointed ears twitched atop her head, and he could see the hint of a tail swishing behind her as she knelt beside him. Yet there was something achingly beautiful about her features, something that made his heart skip despite his confusion. Where am I?" he managed to croak, his throat dry as stellar dust. "Meridian Station," she replied, sitting back on her heels. "Trading post on the edge of the neutral zone. I'm near a moonwhisper of the Vulpine Collective. And you, human, just crashed your cargo hauler into our docking bay during one of the worst ion storms in decades." Memory flooded back in painful waves. Jackson had been running supplies to the Outer Rim colonies when the storm hit. His navigation systems had failed, life support was failing, and he'd barely managed to reach the nearest port before his ship gave out completely. He struggled to sit up, wincing as his ribs protested. "My cargo, is it intact? I've got medical supplies bound for New Geneva colony. People are counting on." "Your precious cargo is fine," Nira interrupted, placing a delicate paw-like hand on his chest to keep him from rising too quickly. "Though your ship is another matter entirely. My guess is you'll be staying put for at least a few cycles while we sort out repairs." Jackson found himself studying her more closely now. She wore practical trader's clothing, a fitted jacket of deep purple that complemented her fur, and utility pants that couldn't quite hide her graceful, athletic build. Her tail, which he now realized was quite expressive, swished with what seemed like amusement at his obvious staring. "I need to contact the colony," he said, trying to focus on business rather than the way her fur seemed to shimmer in the station's artificial lighting. "They're expecting those supplies." "Already done," Nira said with a proud lift of her chin. "Sent word through the traders' network. Your colony friends know you're safe and that the shipment will be delayed but intact." Something in her tone made him pause. "You didn't have to do that. Didn't I?" She tilted her head, those amber eyes studying him intently. "My people have a saying, a stranger's welfare reflects the host's honor. Besides," she added with a playful grin that revealed slightly pointed canines, "it's not often we get such an interesting visitor." Before Jackson could ask what she meant by interesting, an alarm began blaring throughout the station. Red emergency lights bathed the small medical bay where they sat, and Nira's ears immediately flattened against her head. "Ion storms intensifying," she said, jumping to her feet with fluid grace. "Station's going into full lockdown. Nobody in or out until it passes." "How long?" Jackson asked, finally managing to sit up fully despite the protest from his bruised body. "Could be hours, could be days. These storms are unpredictable." Nira moved to a small porthole and peered out into the swirling chaos of charged particles that danced around the station's shields. "Looks like we're going to get to know each other better whether we want to or not." Jackson joined her at the porthole, standing close enough that he could smell her scent, something wild and clean, like mountain air and starflowers. The storm outside was magnificent and terrifying, sheets of energy cascading across the station's protective barriers in brilliant displays of purple and gold. "Beautiful," he murmured. "And deadly," Nira added, glancing up at him. "Much like many things in this galaxy." There was something in her voice, a subtle challenge that made Jackson's pulse quicken. He turned to face her fully, noting how the emergency lighting cast interesting shadows across her features. "You said it's not often you get interesting visitors. What makes me interesting?" Nira's tail swished more rapidly now, and he was beginning to recognize it as a sign of either agitation or excitement. "Most humans who pass through here barely acknowledge we exist. To them, we're just another alien species to trade with, useful but ultimately disposable. You're the first one who's looked at me like. She paused, seeming to search for words. Like what? Like I'm a person worth knowing, not just a transaction to complete. The honesty in her voice caught him off guard. Jackson had grown up on the frontier worlds where humans and aliens mingled more freely than in the core systems. To him, species differences were just another form of diversity to appreciate, not barriers to overcome. That's because you are worth knowing, he said simply. You saved my life, took care of my cargo responsibilities, and now you're stuck with me during a storm. I'd say that makes you pretty remarkable. Neera's ears perked up, and she stepped closer to him. Careful, Star Sailor. Compliments like that might go to a girl's head. Would that be such a bad thing? She looked up at him through long lashes, her amber eyes dancing with mischief. That depends entirely on what you plan to do about it. The challenge in her voice was unmistakable now, and Jackson felt something primal stir within him. This wasn't just casual flirtation, there was something deeper happening here, some kind of connection that transcended species boundaries. Among my people, Neera continued, her voice dropping to a husky whisper, we believe in being direct about our interests. No games, no pretense. Before he could react, she rose up on her toes and gently nipped his shoulder through his shirt, not hard enough to hurt but firm enough to make her intentions clear. Jackson's breath caught in his throat. The gesture was playful yet intimate, alien yet somehow perfectly natural. Acting on pure instinct, he cupped her face in his hands and returned the gesture, gently biting the soft fur at the junction of her neck and shoulder. Neera's eyes went wide with surprise, then something deeper, respect and desire mingled together. You understand, she whispered, her voice filled with wonder. Understand what? The bite exchange. It's how my people show interest, test compatibility. Most humans find it primitive or threatening. Her paws came up to rest against his chest, claws gently kneading through his shirt. But you responded like you were born to it. Jackson's hands remained cradled around her face, his thumbs gently stroking the soft fur of her cheeks. Maybe I was. Maybe this is exactly where I'm supposed to be. The storm raged outside, trapping them together in the small confines of the medical bay, but neither of them minded anymore. Neera's tail wrapped around his leg in what he instinctively understood was a gesture of claiming, of belonging. The storm could last days, she reminded him, but her tone suggested she hoped it would. I can't think of anyone I'd rather be stranded with, Jackson replied, pulling her closer until there was barely any space between them. As if in response to his words, the lights dimmed to emergency power, casting the room in a warm, intimate glow. Outside, the ion storm painted the stars in brilliant streaks of color, but inside, two souls from different worlds discovered that sometimes the most unexpected encounters lead to the most extraordinary connections. Neera's purr, a sound he hadn't noticed before, began as a low rumble in her chest, and Jackson realized with a start that this was just the beginning of what promised to be a journey beyond anything he'd ever imagined. Marcus Reed had always prided himself on keeping his engineering equipment in perfect condition, which made the complete failure of his ship's quantum drive all the more humiliating. One moment he'd been cruising through neutral space on his way to deliver prototype engine modifications to a research station, and the next he was drifting helplessly as his life support systems slowly failed. The rescue ship that answered his distress call was unlike anything he'd seen before, sleek and organic looking, with curves that seemed to flow like liquid metal. When the docking tube extended and the airlock cycled open, Marcus found himself face to face with the most striking woman he'd ever encountered, human or otherwise. She was tall and graceful, with short, midnight black fur that seemed to absorb light, and the most incredible golden eyes with vertically slitted pupils. Her ears were pointed and mobile, currently flattened back in what he quickly recognized as suspicion. She wore form-fitting coveralls that did nothing to hide her athletic build, and her tail, long and expressive, lashed behind her with obvious irritation. Human, she said, her voice carrying a slight accent that made his name sound like music. I am Zephyr Starweaver, chief mechanic of the Void's Grace. My captain sent me to assess your situation. Marcus Reed, he replied, extending his hand in greeting. When she didn't take it, he let it drop awkwardly. "I'm grateful for the rescue. My drive core just died. I've never seen anything like it." Zephyr's golden eyes narrowed as she moved past him to examine his ship's systems. Her movements were fluid and precise, like a dancer, but Marcus noticed how she carefully maintained distance between them. "Your gratitude may be premature, human. My crew is not fond of your species." Before Marcus could ask what she meant, two more figures appeared in the airlock, both feline like Zephyr, but larger and more muscular. Their fur was striped in patterns of brown and gold, and their expressions were openly hostile. "Zeph, why are we wasting time with this human?" one of them growled, his voice deep and threatening. "Leave him for the void. One less problem for the galaxy." "Shut it, Riven," Zephyr snapped without looking back from the console she was examining. "We follow salvage protocol regardless of species." She paused, her ears twitching as she studied the readouts. "Though this is unusual." "What's unusual?" Marcus asked, moving closer despite the threatening glares from her companions. "Your drive core didn't fail," Zephyr said, her voice carrying a note of professional intrigue that seemed to override her personal reservations. "It was sabotaged. Quantum resonance disruptor, very sophisticated. Someone wanted you dead, human." Marcus felt his blood run cold. "That's impossible. I just left port this morning." "Who would?" His question was cut off by a shrill alarm from Zephyr's ship. Her ears shot upright, and she spun toward the airlock where one of her crew members was frantically gesturing. "Zeph! Spatial anomaly, coming in fast. We need to move now." Through the porthole, Marcus could see space itself beginning to twist and writhe, reality bending in ways that hurt to look at directly. Zephyr cursed in what he assumed was her native language and grabbed his arm, her claws extending slightly in her urgency. "We need to get to my ship. Now. Grab whatever you can't live without, we have 30 seconds before that anomaly tears both vessels apart." Marcus snatched his engineering toolkit and a small bag of personal items, then followed Zephyr through the docking tube as her crew frantically prepared for emergency departure. The moment they were aboard, the tube retracted and Zephyr's ship, the Void's Grace, lurched into motion. But they weren't fast enough. The anomaly caught them just as they cleared Marcus's doomed vessel, and he watched through the viewport as his ship was stretched and twisted into impossible shapes before simply ceasing to exist. The Void's Grace shuddered and groaned as space-time warped around them, and Marcus found himself thrown against a bulkhead as the artificial gravity fluctuated wildly. Zephyr landed beside him, her cat-like reflexes allowing her to control her fall better than his human clumsiness. For a moment, they were pressed together, and Marcus caught her scent, something like cinnamon and starlight, warm and exotic. "Status report," she called out, pushing away from him as the ship stabilized. "Drive core is intact, but we're trapped in a null space pocket," came the reply from the bridge. The anomaly created a bubble of distorted spacetime. "We can't jump out until it collapses naturally." "How long?" Zephyr demanded, helping Marcus to his feet with surprising gentleness. "Could be hours, could be days. Impossible to predict." Zephyr's tail lashed with frustration, and Marcus noticed how her crew members exchanged worried glances. He was clearly not welcome here, and being trapped with him was making everyone tense. "I can help," he offered quietly. "I'm an engineer. If there's a way to destabilize the anomaly from inside, I might be able to figure it out." "Human engineering is primitive compared to our technology," Riven sneered. "What could you possibly—" "Enough," Zephyr interrupted, her voice carrying clear authority. "Riven, Tal, secure the ship and begin diagnostics. I'll work with Marcus to analyze the anomaly." She looked at Marcus with those striking golden eyes. "But understand this, human, I'm doing this for my crew, not for you." The next several hours were a lesson in cultural tension and unexpected cooperation. Marcus found himself working alongside Zephyr in the ship's engineering section, their initial hostility gradually giving way to professional respect as they tackled the complex physics of their situation. Zephyr's people, the Kithra, had developed technology that seemed to blend seamlessly with their natural abilities. Her claws could interface directly with certain systems, and her enhanced senses allowed her to detect problems that would require instruments for humans to find. Meanwhile, Marcus's theoretical knowledge and different perspective on the problems led to insights that impressed even Zephyr's skeptical crew. "Your people think in straight lines," Zephyr observed as they worked on modifying a sensor array. "Logical, methodical. My people think in curves, spirals. We see connections you miss. And you see patterns we might overlook," Marcus replied, watching her delicate claws make adjustments to circuitry that would have required micro-tools for him to attempt. "It's like we're designed to complement each other." Zephyr paused in her work, fixing him with an unreadable stare. "Designed by whom?" "Figure of speech," Marcus said, though he found himself wondering if it really was. "I just meant." "I know what you meant," she said softly, and for the first time since they'd met, her hostility seemed to crack just a little. "Among my people, we have a concept called spiral mates, beings whose paths interweave in complex patterns, making both stronger." "Is that what we are?" Marcus asked, surprised by his own boldness. Zephyr's ears flattened slightly, and she turned back to her work. "You are human. I am Kithra. Our species have history." "What kind of history?" "The kind that ends with dead Kithra," she said, her voice suddenly cold. "Your expansion into our territory, your colonization efforts that displaced 3 of our clan worlds. My own birth clan was scattered when humans decided our planet was uninhabited, because we don't build cities the way you do." Marcus felt the weight of her words settle over him like a shroud. "I'm sorry. I didn't know." "Of course you didn't," Zephyr snapped, her tail lashing. "Humans rarely bother to learn about the peoples they displace. We're just obstacles to your manifest destiny among the stars." For a moment, silence stretched between them, heavy with old pain and newer tensions. Then Marcus set down his tools and turned to face her fully. "You're right," he said quietly. "My people have done terrible things. I can't change that, and I won't insult you by making excuses. But I'm not my entire species, Zephyr. I'm just Marcus Reed, engineer, who's grateful to be alive and who's impressed as hell by your ship, your technology, and your skill." Zephyr's golden eyes studied his face intently, as if searching for deception. "Pretty words, human." "Marcus," he corrected gently. "And they're true words. I understand if you can't trust me because of what my people have done, but maybe we can trust each other. Just us, just here, just now." Something shifted in Zephyr's expression, a subtle softening around her eyes. "The anomaly is destabilizing," she said, turning back to the sensors. "If we can create a resonance cascade in the quantum matrix, we might be able to collapse it from the inside." "That's incredibly dangerous," Marcus pointed out. "If we miscalculate, we die," Zephyr finished. "But if we do nothing, we die slowly as our life support fails. I'd rather go out fighting." Marcus nodded, understanding completely. "What do you need me to do?" As they worked together to implement their desperate plan, something shifted between them. The careful distance Zephyr had maintained began to close, and Marcus found himself acutely aware of her presence, the way she moved with feline grace, the soft sound she made when concentrating, the way her fur seemed to shimmer under the engineering bay's lights. "Marcus," she said suddenly, pausing in her calibrations. "If this doesn't work." "It will work," he said firmly. "But if it doesn't," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper, "I want you to know that working with you has been illuminating. You're not what I expected from a human." "What did you expect?" "Arrogance. Dismissiveness. The assumption that your way is the only way." She turned to face him, and he was startled to see vulnerability in those golden eyes. Instead, I found curiosity, respect, and a mind that thinks in patterns I've never encountered. Before Marcus could respond, she stepped closer, close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her fur-covered skin. Among my people, we believe that trust is earned through shared danger. You've earned mine, Marcus Reed. The moment hung between them, charged with possibility, until the ship's alert system chimed their readiness to attempt the cascade. Working in perfect synchronization, they initiated the sequence that would either free them or destroy them. The void's grace shuddered and groaned as competing forces tore at the fabric of space around them. Through the viewports, they could see reality twisting and reshaping itself, colors that had no names painting the cosmos in impossible hues. Then, with a sound like the universe sighing, the anomaly collapsed, and they were free. As the ship stabilized and the stars returned to their proper positions, Marcus and Zephyr found themselves standing very close together, both breathing hard from the tension and exertion. Without thinking, Marcus reached out and gently touched her arm. "Thank you," he said. "For saving me, for trusting me, for everything." Zephyr looked down at his hand on her arm, then up at his face. "Thank you for showing me that not all humans are the same." Her crew's celebration from the bridge reminded them both that they weren't alone, and they stepped apart, though reluctantly. But something had fundamentally changed between them, a bridge built across the gulf of species and history, strong enough to support whatever might come next. As the void's grace set course for the nearest port, Marcus found himself hoping that this wouldn't be goodbye. He'd found something in Zephyr that he'd never expected to find, a kindred spirit who happened to have golden eyes and midnight fur, and who'd shown him that the universe was full of wonders he'd never imagined. River Blackthorn had traveled across half the galaxy to document the Festival of Two Moons, the most sacred celebration of the Lupin Confederacy. As a freelance artist and cultural documentarian, he lived for moments like these, opportunities to capture the beauty and complexity of alien cultures through his holocameras and sketches. The festival grounds on Lycaon Prime were breathtaking, sprawling across ancient terraced gardens beneath the light of the planet's twin moons. Thousands of beings from dozens of species mingled in harmony, sharing food, music, and stories under the silver-blue moonlight. But River found his attention continually drawn to the central performance stage, where traditional Lupin dancers moved with otherworldly grace. And at the center of it all was the most captivating performer he'd ever seen. Sienna Nightglow moved as if she were made of moonlight itself, her silver-white fur catching and reflecting the lunar radiance as she led the ceremonial dance. She was tall and elegant, with distinctly Lupin features, pointed ears that swiveled with the rhythm, expressive amber eyes, and a magnificent tail that seemed to conduct the very music itself. Her traditional costume was minimalist yet stunning, flowing fabrics in deep blues and silvers that enhanced rather than concealed her natural beauty. River found himself lowering his camera, no longer interested in capturing the moment for posterity. Instead, he was completely absorbed in watching Sienna's performance, the way she seemed to embody the very spirit of the celebration. The dance told the story of the first moonrise, when the Lupin ancestors learned to sing to the stars and found their voices echoing back from the void. Sienna's movements were poetry in motion, her body telling a story that transcended language barriers. When the performance ended, the audience erupted in appreciative howls, the traditional Lupin expression of approval. River was still applauding when Sienna's gaze found his across the crowd. For a moment, their eyes locked, and he felt something electric pass between them. Then someone jostled him from behind, breaking the spell, and when he looked again, she had vanished into the crowd. Determined to find her, River made his way toward the performers' area, using his press credentials to gain access backstage. He found Sienna near a small stream that ran through the festival grounds, kneeling by the water's edge as she washed the ceremonial paint from her fur. "Excuse me," he called softly, not wanting to startle her. "I'm River Blackthorn, documentarian. Your performance was transcendent." Sienna looked up, droplets of water clinging to the fur around her muzzle. Up close, she was even more beautiful, her amber eyes held depths that seemed to reflect centuries of starlight, and there was an intelligence there that made his pulse quicken. "You're the human with the cameras," she said, her voice carrying a melodic quality that matched her movements. I saw you watching. You stopped recording partway through. Some things are too beautiful to view through a lens, River admitted, sitting on a nearby stone without invitation. They demand to be experienced directly. Sienna's ears perked up with interest. Most humans who come to document our festivals treat us like curiosities, exotic specimens to be catalogued. You watched like you were, listening. Because I was. Art speaks to art, regardless of species. River pulled out his sketchpad, flipping through pages of drawings he'd made throughout the evening. I've been to dozens of festivals across the galaxy, but I've never seen anything like what you did up there. It wasn't just dance, it was storytelling, spirituality, and pure emotion all woven together. Sienna moved closer to examine his sketches, her tail swishing with what he was learning to recognize as curiosity. These are remarkable. You capture not just the physical form, but the essence, the spirit of the moment. That's what I try to do, River said, acutely aware of her nearness. She smelled like moonflowers and wild places, clean and intoxicating. Art should reveal truth, not just surface appearance. My grandmother used to say something similar, Sienna mused, settling beside him on the stone. She said that the best dancers don't just move their bodies, they move souls. Your grandmother sounds wise. She was the greatest dancer of her generation. She taught me that dance is our way of speaking to the universe, of finding our place in the cosmic song. Sienna's eyes grew distant. She died last season. This was her favorite festival. River heard the pain in her voice and acted on instinct, reaching out to gently touch her paw. I'm sorry for your loss. But I think she would have been proud of tonight's performance. You didn't just honor the tradition, you elevated it. Sienna's ears flattened slightly, but she didn't pull away from his touch. You speak of things you cannot understand, human. The moon song is sacred to my people, passed down through generations of. Her words were cut off by a thunderous explosion from the direction of the main festival grounds. The night sky lit up with harsh red light, and screams echoed across the gardens. River and Sienna leaped to their feet as chaos erupted around them. Terrorist attack, someone shouted in the distance. Everyone evacuate. River grabbed Sienna's hand instinctively. We need to get out of here. But as they ran toward the evacuation routes, more explosions rocked the grounds. Emergency sirens wailed, and armed figures in dark combat gear began appearing throughout the festival, firing indiscriminately at the fleeing crowd. This way, Sienna said, pulling River away from the main paths. I know these grounds, there are ancient ruins beneath the gardens. We can hide there until security arrives. They ran through winding garden paths as the festival grounds burned behind them. Sienna's lupin senses guided them through the darkness, her superior night vision and hearing keeping them ahead of the attackers. Finally, she led him to what appeared to be a decorative stone wall covered in flowering vines. Here, she panted, pulling aside the vegetation to reveal a hidden opening. The old ceremonial chambers. They're part of the original temple complex. They squeezed through the narrow opening and found themselves in a vast underground chamber lit by phosphorescent crystals embedded in the walls. Ancient lupin artwork covered every surface, murals depicting the early history of her people, their first contact with the stars, their development of the moonsong traditions. It's incredible, River breathed, temporarily forgetting their danger as he took in the artistic treasures surrounding them. My people built this place 3,000 years ago, Sienna said, her voice echoing softly in the chamber. When we first learned to listen to the voices of the cosmos. She moved deeper into the chamber, her fur gleaming in the crystal light. Few outsiders have ever seen this place. Why did you bring me here? Sienna turned to face him, her amber eyes reflecting the ancient light. Because when the explosion started, my first thought wasn't of escape, it was of protecting you. And I don't understand why. River stepped closer, his heart pounding. Maybe because we recognize something in each other. Two artists, two souls trying to capture beauty in a universe that can be harsh and violent. Above them, They could hear the distant sounds of the attack continuing, shouting voices, more explosions, the whine of emergency vehicles. But down here in the ancient chamber, surrounded by the artistic legacy of Siena's people, it felt like they were in a pocket of peace outside of time. Your grandmother's teachings, River said softly. About dance being a way to speak to the universe, I think art in all its forms does that. My photography, your dance, these ancient murals, they're all attempts to touch something eternal. Siena's ears perked up as she studied his face in the crystal light. You really do understand. I'm trying to. Teach me. What happened next seemed as natural as breathing. Siena began to move, not the formal choreography of the festival performance, but something more intimate and personal. Her body swayed to music only she could hear, and gradually River found himself moving with her, drawn into the rhythm of her dance. Feel the music of the stones, she whispered, her voice blending with the whispered echoes of the chamber. Listen to the song of the crystals. River had never considered himself a dancer, but with Siena's guidance he found himself moving in harmony with her, their bodies creating a dialogue without words. The ancient chamber seemed to approve, the crystals pulsing brighter as if responding to their movement. When they finally stopped, they were standing very close together, both breathing hard from the improvised dance. Siena's eyes were wide with wonder. I've never danced with a human before, she said softly. I didn't know it was possible. I've never danced with anyone like that, River replied honestly. It felt like speaking a language you didn't know you knew, Siena finished. Above them, the sounds of conflict were beginning to fade, replaced by the organized voices of security forces retaking control. But neither River nor Siena seemed eager to return to the surface world. When this is over, River said, would you teach me more about the moon song? I'd like to document the real traditions, not just the public performances. Siena's tail swished thoughtfully. That would require spending considerable time with my people. Learning our ways, earning trust. Are you prepared for that commitment? If it means spending time with you, I'm prepared for anything. Siena stepped closer, close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her fur. My people believe that the moons bring souls together for a purpose. Perhaps this attack, terrible as it was meant to bring us to this place, this moment of understanding. River reached up to gently touch her face, marveling at the softness of her fur. Then maybe we should honor that purpose. When Siena leaned into his touch, her eyes closing with contentment, River knew that his life had just taken a turn he never could have anticipated. He'd come to Lycaon Prime to document an alien festival, but he'd found something infinitely more precious, a kindred spirit who danced with moonlight and spoke the universal language of art. The sound of rescue teams calling out above reminded them that the world was waiting, but for now, in this ancient chamber surrounded by the artistic legacy of Siena's ancestors, they had found something that transcended species boundaries, a connection that would change both their lives forever. As they prepared to return to the surface, Siena took his hand in her paw. Whatever happens next, she said, remember this moment. Remember that beneath all our differences, we share the same longing to touch the infinite. River squeezed her paw gently. I'll remember. And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to capture that longing in my art. Together, they climbed back toward the surface, leaving the ancient chamber but carrying its magic with them. Above, the twin moons of Lycaon Prime continued their eternal dance across the star-scattered sky, witnesses to another connection forged across the vast spaces between worlds. The festival of two moons had been interrupted by violence, but from that darkness, something beautiful had emerged, proof that love and art could flourish even in the most unexpected circumstances, and that sometimes the most profound connections are born from the most challenging moments. Epilogue. 6 months later, River's documentary, Songs of Moonlight, The Hidden Culture of the Lupin Confederacy, would win the Galactic Arts Council's highest honor. But more importantly, his partnership with Siena, both artistic and personal, would become a bridge between their peoples, showing the galaxy that differences in species were merely different verses in the same cosmic song. And on certain nights, when the twin moons of Lycaon Prime were full, visitors to the ancient chamber beneath the festival grounds might catch a glimpse of two figures dancing together, a human and a lupin, moving in perfect harmony to music that spoke to souls across all boundaries of flesh and fur, proving that love truly was the most universal language of all.